Okay, let's dive straight into something that's got the software development world buzzing and maybe a little bit stressed. Vibe coding.
It really has. It's a
Um,
term that's sparking some, well, pretty intense debate right now.
right.
For this deep dive, we've pulled together a really interesting mix of sources. We've got a hot button Reddit thread from our ChatGPT coding, the one titled Hot Take, Vibe Coding is Not the Future.
Hmm.
And then there's an article, The Problem with Vibe Coding by Dylan Beatty, plus another piece, Your Future with Vibe Coding, Why Developers Still Matter. That was also on Reddit.
Okay, so quite a mix. And what's the core tension here? What's the actual debate about?
Well, you've got this clash, right, between the, I guess, incredible promise of using AI to generate code super fast,
Yeah, the speed is definitely appealing.
but sometimes, it seems, without needing to fully get it,
Yeah.
understand what it's doing. And that clashes with the fundamental kind of age-old truth that building reliable software actually requires knowing how things work under the hood.
So it's really forcing a look at how coding is changing, or maybe not changing as much as some people think.
Exactly. So our goal today is to try and cut through some of that noise. We want to unpack what this vibe coding thing actually is, look at the wildly different perspectives from our sources.
The excitement, the skepticism.
Right, the excitement, the deep skepticism, the warnings about major pitfalls. We want to help you understand this emerging trend and, what it could mean if you're involved in creating software or even if you're just curious about how it all gets made.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump in. This whole idea of vibe coding, where did it even come from? What does it actually look like in practice?
Well, the term seems to have really picked up steam from Andrej Karpathy's description. He
Mhm.
talked about using large language models, LLMs,
Right.
to generate code based on natural language prompts.
Yeah.
So basically telling the AI what you want the code to do in plain English.
Okay, so far that sounds like standard AI assistance, right? What makes it specifically vibe coding?
The vibe part, as he described it, is about really giving in to the AI's suggestions,
Hmm.
just going with the flow,
Like fully trusting it.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Accepting the generated code without a deep review, hitting accept all, maybe even skipping the step of reading the code differences, the diffs.
Whoa, skipping the diffs. Okay, that immediately sounds a bit, well, uncontrolled.
It does, doesn't it? And it goes further. Karpathy's description included asking the AI for things that might seem, I don't know, dumb or trivial, because it's just easier than doing it yourself.
Like what?
Like decrease the padding on the sidebar by half,
Hmm?
small tweaks. It also involves copy-pasting error messages back into the AI, just hoping it fixes itself.
Huh.
And the code you end up with, it can kind of grow beyond your own ability to fully grasp it. And then maybe you hit bugs the AI just can't seem to resolve, and you find yourself sort of working around them rather than fixing the root cause.
Okay, but Karpathy, just to be clear, he put this style into a specific context, didn't he? He wasn't saying, do this for everything.
Exactly. That's crucial. He specifically said it was not too bad for throwaway weekend projects, a way to mess around.
Right.
He wasn't necessarily pitching it for building like robust production-ready software.
Yeah.
But that distinction, it seems to get lost sometimes.
How so?
Well, particularly in the reactions we see.
Yeah.
If you look at that Reddit thread, the hot take one,
Yeah.
the original poster there defines vibe coding much more critically, much more negatively.
How do they frame it?
They describe it as something used by basic script kiddies who believe programming is dead. They see it as people just copying code generated by ChatGPT and slapping it into a file,
Yeah.
genuinely thinking they are programmers now.
Oof. So pretty dismissive view then.
Very. And the absolute core of their criticism, and this is a major theme across all our sources, is the lack of understanding.
Right.
It's about using code you haven't taken the time to actually comprehend
Mhm.
before you integrate it or, rely on it.
Okay, so we have these two views. One, maybe it's an experimental way to quickly prototype stuff for yourself. The other, it's a term for, well, what critics see as just using AI blindly without learning the craft.
Hmm.
Yet, despite that strong criticism, there's clearly something appealing about this approach. People are excited. What's driving that?
Oh, the biggest appeal is definitely accessibility
Mm.
and speed. It
Mhm.
just dramatically lowers the barrier to entry for creating functional code.
How low are we talking? Like, who's using this?
Well, the sources mention enabling people with really minimal development experience. Think like a social media community manager or even an architect.
An architect, really?
Yeah, there's this example of an architect, no prior coding background, who apparently created a pretty sophisticated Vision Pro app. It had hand tracking, audio, graphics,
Hmm.
all in just 2 weeks using this kind of AI generation
Hmm.
approach.
Wow. Okay, that is a powerful story for someone who has an idea but not the traditional coding skills.
Absolutely. It allows people with the vision to translate that into something tangible much, much faster.
Hmm.
And even for experienced developers or those with some background, the reported speed increases are, well, immense.
How immense.
10 to 100 times faster was mentioned in the sources for certain types of tasks.
100 times faster? Seriously, what kind of tasks are seeing those massive gains?
Well, users claim they're building entire systems, sometimes even complex ones like microservice architectures, with minimal manual code changes.
Entire systems.
Yeah. Think entire mobile game code bases, challenges, rewards, leaderboards, the whole 9 yards, reportedly done in like 3 days.
3 days. Wow.
Another really vivid example someone shared was building a Minecraft clone, with infinite terrain generation using complex algorithms like Perlin noise,
Okay.
completed in just 4 hours.
A Minecraft clone in 4 hours. Yeah, that certainly makes the point about speed.
It really highlights how, for certain problems, or maybe just getting the initial scaffolding up, you can kind of type out the logic or requirements in pseudocode, or even plain English, and the LLM handles translating it into actual code. Maybe even generates tests for you.
Right.
And it's useful for more routine stuff too, obviously, like creating basic interfaces,
Mm.
CRUD stuff, create, read, update, delete, generating boilerplate code, helping write unit tests,
Makes sense.
and even for research, apparently. Quickly summarizing information or suggesting initial approaches for things like, say, implementing an image color reduction algorithm or finding sauce providers skips hours of Googling sometimes.
And I think you mentioned it's even being used as a sort of learning assistant.
Yeah, that's another angle. For some, it functions as this kind of interactive tutor. It lets them learn by asking questions about code they're stuck on without the pressure maybe of asking a human.
That's interesting.
There was one person who described using an LLM to learn Python. Started with Hello World, obviously, and apparently progressed to building actual tools for their work in just 6 months.
How?
By asking the AI for ideas when they got stuck, and then using traditional resources like Google to dig deeper and really understand the concepts. So kind of a hybrid approach.
Okay, so the appeal is undeniable. It's democratizing creation, it's speeding things up dramatically. But like you said, the core criticism is that lack of understanding. That Reddit hot take really hammered that point. This tension seems absolutely central.
It absolutely is. The most significant problem, the one highlighted again and again, is that relying solely on AI generation, especially the vibe approach, can stop you from actually understanding your code.
Yeah, it makes me think of that famous Feynman quote, doesn't it? What I cannot create, I do not understand.
Exactly that. The argument is that true mastery and definitely the ability to build reliable, robust systems comes from deep comprehension. Critics of this blind vibe coding argue that if you don't understand the code the AI spits out, you're basically operating on shaky ground.
Right.
Some feel the underlying message that you don't need to understand is just deeply flawed. That, it's very much not okay to know nothing. You risk being completely blinded by your own creation, as one source put it.
And that lack of understanding must have knock-on effects, right? Especially thinking long-term, like technical debt.
Oh, absolutely. It leads directly, almost inevitably, to significant technical debt. Taking shortcuts for speed now often results in, well, uglier, harder to maintain code later on.
Because the AI isn't thinking about good design principles.
It might not be applying things like solid principles or DRY, don't repeat yourself. It just generates what works now, which can make the whole application unwieldy. And then when new developers join the team, they have a nightmare trying to understand or modify these code bases.
And that technical debt isn't just some abstract concept, right? It has real-world costs.
Huge costs. It means painful, expensive future fixes,
Yeah.
debugging becomes a nightmare, or sometimes you even need complete rewrites. Sources mention concerns from places like Y Combinator.
The startup incubator?
Yeah, concerns about startups showing up with code bases that are almost entirely AI generated.
Yeah.
And they're asking, how are we going to maintain and debug this stuff at scale? Especially since the current AI models, well, they're not good at debugging existing complex code bases.
Hmm.
Someone in the sources even predicted that a big part of future software engineering jobs will basically involve cleaning up the mess left by poorly managed AI-generated code that got pushed into production too quickly.
So the speed gained now could mean a massive maintenance bill later.
Okay.
Beyond just maintainability, how well does this vibe coding approach handle, say, complexity? Or doing something genuinely new?
That's another major limitation highlighted in the sources. The usefulness of LLMs seems to decrease sharply when you move beyond common patterns or boilerplate code. They struggle with truly complex and novel algorithms or dealing with, arcane niche pieces of technology.
Got an example.
Yeah, there's a really striking one. Someone tried to generate code for something quite specific. A 25-year-old binary data format used in music synthesizers. Sounds, I think?
Okay. Niche.
Very niche. It apparently took 2 weeks of deeply technical prompting, guiding the AI very carefully. And the early attempts, they just hallucinated methods that didn't even exist in the libraries.
Wow.
It absolutely needed someone with strong software engineering discipline, someone who understood the domain deeply, to actually guide the AI effectively and correct its mistakes.
Which brings us right back to the need for expertise, doesn't it? You need the knowledge to ask the right questions in the first place and then to evaluate the answers critically.
Precisely. You have to remember, LLMs are probabilistic. Their output can change. It's not deterministic like a compiler. And debugging complex, novel issues in an AI-generated codebase, especially when you didn't fully understand to begin with, that can be much, much harder than debugging code written by a human who does understand it.
Yeah, I can see that. And there's also the potential for just plain misinformation or even security problems if you're just taking whatever the AI gives you without really checking it.
Absolutely. The influencers pushing the coding is dead narrative are often criticized for potentially misleading people. AI can hallucinate, it can generate code that's just wrong, inefficient, or worse, insecure.
Like actively harmful.
Potentially, yeah. The sources shared a pretty concerning example of a simple app, maybe generated through a no-code or vibe coding approach, that was apparently flat-out stealing people's Facebook login credentials. It just put some text fields next to a Facebook logo and saved whatever the user typed into a local plain text file. No encryption, nothing,
Yeah.
just saved it.
Oh my God.
It just perfectly illustrates how easy it is to create insecure systems when you don't understand what the generated code is actually doing under the hood.
Okay, that's a really stark reminder of the risks involved. So given these serious downsides, is the issue really AI generating code, or is it more about how people are using it? This seems like the core of that vibe coding versus AI-assisted development distinction.
That's exactly where many in the sources seem to land. The consensus isn't really that AI coding itself is bad, it's that vibe coding, understood as that blind acceptance without understanding. That's problematic.
Right.
In fact, some suggest that vibe coding is best done by us, meaning by experienced developers.
Okay, so it's not about the tool itself, but about the user's expertise determining whether it's used effectively and safely.
Exactly. Experienced developers aren't using AI to avoid understanding things. They're using it as an extension of the programmer, as one source put it. They can formulate sophisticated prompts precisely because they already have a deep understanding of the problem domain and potential solutions.
So they use it for grunt work, maybe, like boilerplate.
Yeah, generating snippets, boilerplate code, maybe exploring different implementation options quickly. They're acting like an engineer, carefully reviewing, testing, and integrating the code the AI suggests.
They're acting more like editors and architects rather than just passive recipients of the code.
Exactly. Or you could think even higher level, like a technical architect manager. They might use AI to generate larger chunks of code, but they're focused on guiding it according to established best practices, architectural patterns, and the overall structure of the application they've designed.
And that approach minimizes the technical debt we talked about.
Precisely. It helps ensure the project remains maintainable, scalable, and that onboarding new developers isn't a nightmare.
So for experienced developers, AI makes them better and more efficient, potentially, rather than enabling them to know nothing.
That's definitely the view coming through. It's like having a team of junior devs you can quickly direct. Or maybe like working with an autopilot system. The human developer is still the pilot, navigating, making all the critical decisions, taking over when needed.
Which brings us back to that really critical point we touched on earlier. To ask the right question of the AI, you already need to know most of the answer.
Bingo. Effective use absolutely requires that underlying knowledge base. You need to understand enough to formulate precise queries, evaluate the output critically, debug it when it's wrong, and integrate it correctly into the larger system.
And this ties into a really useful way of thinking about all this, which Dylan Beatty highlighted in his article,
Yeah.
the crucial difference between programs and products.
Yes, this is such a key distinction. Beatty defines programs as basically code you write for yourself. Works on my machine kind of stuff.
Like personal scripts.
Exactly. Quick scripts to rename files, maybe prototypes you're just playing with, experiments. Often, these programs have zero error checking. might use hard-coded paths or values. The code is just a means to an end. The goal is the immediate result, just for you.
Oh,
And
yeah.
for creating those, AI is incredibly empowering. And maybe vibe coding in its raw form is perfectly sufficient for that kind of task.
Okay, so personal tools, throwaway projects. Got it. What about products?
Right. Products are entirely different. This is software that's intended to be shipped, distributed, or sold to other people. And BD argues this is a whole different ballgame.
Why? What's the difference?
It means considering a million other things, like different character encodings for international users,
Mm.
handling multiple users concurrently without things breaking, robust authentication and security, collecting telemetry to see how it's used, maybe handling billing, branding, making sure it works on mobile, deployment strategies, security audits,
Wow.
and handling every imaginable edge case and system limit. He gives an example of a system failing unexpectedly after exactly 65,535 requests, because a variable overflowed something you'd never think about for a quick personal script.
So turning that quick script, that program, into something reliable, secure, and scalable enough for actual users, that's where the real heavy lifting and expertise comes in.
Absolutely. Vibe coding might generate the core logic for a simple task, the program part, but transforming that into a robust product requires immense effort from experienced developers to add all those necessary layers, handle the complexity, ensure reliability and security. A vibe-coded product created without that deep human oversight and expertise. It's, at best, a proof of concept.
Okay, that really reframes the whole debate. It's not just about whether AI can generate code, but whether it can build a reliable, production-ready product without requiring deep human understanding and intervention.
Exactly. And that leads us naturally to the bigger picture question. What does all this mean for the future of coding itself?
Well, we certainly heard contrasting views in the sources. Some influencers loudly declaring coding is dead, others vehemently disagreeing.
Yeah, the punch card analogy comes up quite a bit in these discussions. Is coding becoming obsolete just like punch cards did?
What's the counter argument to that?
Well, critics argue that punch cards were replaced because lower-level programming offered performance gains and more direct control. The underlying need to understand the machine and logic didn't disappear, it just shifted. Similarly, they argue replacing horses with cars didn't mean you didn't need to understand how to drive.
So the argument is that the fundamental complexity and the need for logical understanding remain, even if the tools we use to express that logic change.
That's the core argument, yeah. However, it's also undeniable that AI is making programming vastly more accessible, as we saw with those examples earlier. And some proponents are very optimistic. They believe AI will continue to improve dramatically,
To the point where,
to the point where maybe vibe coding becomes more viable even for complex tasks in the future, perhaps within a decade, maybe even within our lifetimes.
but there's still a lot of skepticism about that too, right?
Oh yes, significant skepticism, especially about whether current LLMs, or even near future ones, will ever be able to reliably handle, say, lead staff engineer level code, or manage the intricate complexities of large-scale distributed systems, things involving load balancing, payment processing, complex microservice interactions, without substantial human expertise guiding, directing, and fixing things.
Which brings us back to that often quoted idea: you won't be replaced by AI, you will be replaced by someone using AI.
Right. It really shifts the focus, doesn't it? The value isn't just in the ability to write code line by line from scratch anymore. It's increasingly perhaps in the ability to effectively leverage these incredibly powerful AI tools. The skilled developer becomes the one who can orchestrate the AI, understand its output, guide it, fix it, not just the one who can type the fastest.
And perhaps, as one source suggested, AI's greatest potential in the near future isn't just generating code blindly, but maybe acting as a powerful tool for teaching programming fundamentals, helping people learn the underlying logic better, rather than just bypassing it.
That's a really fascinating possibility, isn't it? Using AI to actually foster deeper understanding, not circumvent it. It almost suggests a future where perhaps there's a clearer distinction. Maybe programmers are the ones who understand the deep logic, the architecture, the system's thinking, and coders are
Yeah.
people highly skilled at using the latest tools, including AI, to translate ideas into functional programs quickly.
Interesting distinction. Okay, so wrapping this up, we've taken a pretty deep dive into this whole vibe coding phenomenon. We've explored the genuine excitement around its potential for accessibility and speed.
Yeah, enabling more people to create things,
Yeah.
accelerating development for others. The appeal is real.
But we've also really confronted the significant concerns: the risk of runaway technical debt, the fundamental problem of using code you don't truly understand, the limitations when dealing with real complexity or novelty.
And the potential security pitfalls, which can be pretty scary if you're just blindly trusting AI-generated code.
And we use that really helpful distinction between building a simple program for yourself versus a robust, shippable product for others as a lens. It helps understand where vibe coding, in its purest, least supervised form, seems most applicable and where it falls dangerously short without that expert oversight.
It really boils down to that core tension, doesn't it? The incredible power of these new AI tools versus the enduring, maybe even increasing value of human understanding, expertise, critical thinking, and careful engineering needed to build reliable, maintainable software systems, especially for anything intended for other people, anything beyond that quick personal script or throwaway project.
Absolutely. So here's maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. If AI can generate code faster than ever before and potentially handle more and more complex tasks down the line, will the most valuable skill in the future truly be less about writing every single line of code from scratch and more about understanding the underlying principles, the architecture, the trade-offs, the logic well enough to act as that expert architect and editor, guiding, reviewing, and correcting the AI's output? And if so, what does that mean for how we learn, teach, and practice programming going forward?